So usually if a Pokemon is min-maxed, it means that it's good. It has an optimal stat spread to fulfill the role. However, sometimes there is a Pokemon who seems like it does have that optimal stat spread, and for one reason or another, it's just not quite OU tier material. Bastion in his debut generation was ranked NU, so that's fun. Bastion has a defensive Pokemon's dream stat spread. While you might not think his HP stat is amazing, his 2 defensive stats are some of the highest in every single gen, so no one really manages to top him when it comes to that. However, on top of that, support-wise, he also has a solid set consisting of Stealth Rocks, Taunt, Toxic, Protect, Roar, and Torment, but he doesn't have reliable recovery, besides Rest. However, now for the elephant in the room, the real reason that he's not a very good Pokemon. He has a Rock Steel typing. Now, Steel is a type that usually fits pretty well with literally any type. It was able to make Ferrothorn a good defensive Pokemon, however, it does not fit very well with Steel. Partly because Rock and Steel have both common weaknesses, so this results in him having a 4 times weakness to fighting and ground. On top of that, also having a weakness to water is not great. In his debut generation, Gen 4 was filled with fighting types. They were really important, such as Machamp, Breloom, Infernape, Lucario, and the constant presence of Earthquake in every single gen is a huge hindrance to him. Really, if you want to be a defensive Pokemon, you have to have a good defending typing. He also has 2 pretty useless abilities in Sturdy and Soundproof. Soundproof makes you immune to sound-based moves, so all 3 of those, and Sturdy itself isn't exactly useless, but Sturdy isn't good for him at all since he's meant to be a wall, as in be able to take multiple hits. If he's doing his role correctly, Sturdy should not be an ability that he should ever actually have to use. He gets outdone most notably by Pokemon like Skarmory, who don't have any 4-time weaknesses and reliable recovery and Roost, or even Gliscor, who definitely has potential to be a physically defensive Pokemon and has immediate recovery in Gen 4. Even in the lower tiers of his debut, he struggled to find a good niche. Basically, he wants to be a Lomolola but can't. Mega Pidgeot. Now, Mega Pidgeot, I know a lot of people would state that putting Mega Pidgeot on this list is unfair, because undoubtedly he does have a better resume than Bastiodon. However, counter-argument, that is a very low bar. Can you really say with your chest that Mega Pidgeotto was good? Probably not. Mega Pidgeotto has an S-tier special attack and speed. It outspeeds literally almost everybody. The problem is, more than anything, its move pool. Pidgeotto is a special attacker. However, he only has like 4 good moves, and one of them is the hidden powers. And honestly, the moves that he has aren't bad. The real elephant in the room is something that I'll get to later. He has Air Cutter, Heat Wave, and Hurricane. And Hurricane is pretty great because of no guard. Overall, it seems like he would synergize well since he also has Roost and U-turn. However, the thing is that if you needed a flying type special attacker, there were better choices. Mega Charizard Y, Tornado Therian, Zapdos, and Thundurus. His typing is actually kind of lackluster as well. Mono Flying would have been better, but instead he gets normal flying. And I guess we could talk about him taking 25% damage from Stealth Rocks, but that really comes secondary to the really big problem was that he doesn't have Focus Blast. Focus Blast is the move that he's missing coverage-wise, which would have honestly elevated him above Tornado Therian. It would have also been perfect with his ability of No Guard. But Game Freak kind of has a history of giving Pokemon a role and then not giving them the tools to fulfill it. While it had success at first, Tornado Therian was overall able to dominate in the game, and he was just kind of left in the UU tier. So while he wasn't a terrible Pokemon, he was a Pokemon that while min-maxed wasn't able to have an everlasting presence in the OU tier because of the fact that he didn't have the dream move pool. Now, Deoxys Defense. Deoxys Defense, just like its other counterparts, are the epitome of min-max. Currently, it's tied for the 5th highest attack stat and the 2nd highest special defense stat. It's meant to be the ultimate wall/support mod, and to be fair, move pool-wise, it's not exactly lacking, as it has Stealth Rocks, Thunder Wave, Taunt, Knock Off, and Recover, although it doesn't have Toxic. In theory, he should work. So what exactly happened? Well, first of all, typing. If you are meant to be a good defensive Pokemon, like I said, you have to have a good defensive typing. And Mono Psychic isn't very good. It has common weaknesses to Dark, Ghost, and Bug, as well as no immunities, and it only resists itself. While you can Terra out of it, if you need to Terra to fill the role you're meant to fill, then it's not exactly worth it to have on your team. Plus, there's a lot of other Pokemon that can fill the role of passive utility Pokemon, like Olomolola, Clefable, Tinglu, Skarmory, and they don't take super effective damage from U-turn. Deoxys Defense doesn't wall any relevant attackers as well. Its monotyping is bad offensively, defensively. It also doesn't have a good particularly relevant ability. Pressure can be good for when you're trying to stall out other Pokemon, but all of its other passive mon counterparts have far better abilities in Iron Bobs, Regenerator, Unaware, or Magic Card. On top of that, it's very easily crippled by status conditions like Toxic, and it also is very weak to other passive Pokemon. For example, Ferrothorn isn't in this gen, but it outdoes Deoxys Defense. It can take him out via Leech Seed or Toxic. Deoxys defense can do nothing to stop it really, or any other Pokemon point blank, which is why it's an NUBL. Snorlax. Snorlax is honestly the epitome of mid-maxed. Its only high stats, as you can see, are HP, attack, and special defense. And while its typing isn't optimal, at one point, it was the best Pokemon of all time in Generation 2. So what exactly happened? Well, first off, Snorlax gets out special walled by other Pokemon now. It's not exactly because his stats are lackluster, but the thing is that he doesn't have immediate recovery that isn't rest. So assuming that you don't want to waste another slot in Sleep Talk, that's 2 move slots that are taken up. Honestly, just having Slack Off personally, I feel like would probably get him out of the ZU tier. Its go-to set of moves has always been the Curslack set, which at this point is walled by plenty of Pokemon, especially because as a normal type, its only good stat move is Body Slam after Return didn't return for Generation 9. It's not menacing in general, but gets walled by just about the most mid-physical defensive Pokemon, like Weezing and Quagsire. While he is the best example of power creep, because in theory, his strengths could compensate for his weaknesses, just other Pokemon that you can bring that aren't Snorlax. One of the reasons he was so good in Generation 1 was because there wasn't a lot of Pokemon that resisted normal. Fighting types were just not relevant, but more normal resists were introduced in the harder time he started having, as well as his setup set just not being as effective as it once was. Dugtrio is another Pokemon that can be legitimately very good, particularly in Generation 3 and 5, because of Arena Trap. Its main goal was to find and trap Blissey. It also, just like Snorlax, is the spitting image of min-max. It only has 2 high stats in speed and attack, with everything else being a bit abysmal. It can't survive any hits, but it doesn't really need to. With 1 Earthquake or Beat Up, it should be able to beat Blissey. In Generation 5, it also had a pivotal role on Sun teams. He was good against Pokemon like Keytran, Tyranitar, Volcarona, an incredibly specific role. But it didn't matter, it was incredibly valuable. Besides that, it had Sandville, and in Generation 5, what it did was it raised evasiveness in 1.5 while Sand was active. This was more valuable than Gen 5 than anything because Weather Wars was rampant, and given the presence of Tyranitar, Sun teams were now thriving for the first time ever. So it seems like he had 2 amazing abilities. That makes him a great addition to offensively oriented teams. What was the problem? Well, first, Arena Trap is banned in like most tiers, with the exception of Gen 3, so he can no longer trap Pokemon like Blissey, and also Sandvale eventually became banned as well. So now he no longer has any cool abilities. He does have a 3rd one, but no one really cares about that. And while Dugtrio does have 2 above average stats, there's plenty of other fast ground types like Garchomp, or more recently Iron Treads. In fact, he's been ZU for 3 generations straight. Even in tiers where it's legal, like Ubers, there's just better Pokemon that serve far more and less niche purposes. He's not getting any better, honestly. Last one is kind of controversial take, but Mega Beedrill had more success than his base form, obviously. But I feel like when you compare the buffs he got to his success, it's not super proportional, it doesn't match up. Beedrill in Generation 6 had the 7th highest attack stat of all time, and is tied for the 9th highest attack stat in Generation 7. Combine that with adaptability, which is a genuinely great ability, it looks like Beedrill would be a great class cannon, with stab U-turns, a poison typing to fight off fairy types. It all seemed like it was really well. But the major issue is that even compared to other glass cannons, he is frail, particularly in the defensive stats. Even Mega Absol has a higher defense stat than it. His other biggest weaknesses was that Mega Aerodactyl was essentially a better version of him, since he's faster and honestly arguably has a better stab typing. Overall, while on paper he would have been great, when you take into account hazard damage, which he's already weak to, his lifespan is very limited even for a glass cannon. Titan is a bulky attacker. He currently has the 4th highest HP stat in the whole game, as well as an attack stat of 113, which is respectable. While his defenses aren't high, it's a similar case to Alomomola where its HP stat is so high, it should in theory make up for it. And as for special and speed, those are 2 fairly irrelevant stats for what he aims to accomplish. He has 3 pretty good abilities, all of which are genuinely great in Thick Fat, Sheer Force, and Sand Force. So what went wrong? Well, for standards, Titan is an Ice type, which is the worst defensive typing. And sure, Thick Fat helps to mitigate that, but he still weaks to Rock, Steel, and Fighting, which are all very common types. Sand Force is an amazing ability as well, but Sand Streamers are not super dominant at all right now. But even if they were, there are much better Sand Streamers. And usually for Sand teams, it's much more beneficial to have an electric type versus an ice type as well. And Sheer Force is a great ability, like I said. There's really no downside to it, except that if you give it Sheer Force, then you just have a mono ice type on your team, and you can't give it Thick Fats, which is, I mean, it's kind of mean, but nobody wants that. But anyways, Titan's main set is the Ice Shard Belly Drum set. As for Belly Drum users, he gets outdone by Azumarill or even other Pokemon who don't typically run it, like Iron Hands or Ursaluna Blood Moon. And while 113 isn't a bad attack stat, It certainly isn't strong enough to OHKO everything in sight. It's also super reliant on Ice Shard because it's very slow. Its more relevant set is the Citrus Berry set. Overall, these are Pokemon that I don't think lived up to their stat spread or what they were meant to achieve. Some of these had more success than others, but overall I feel like they were disappointing.